Right now, as you read this, someone somewhere just pressed Control plus C, and then Control plus V. They didn't think about it. Nobody does. It's as automatic as breathing, a gesture so embedded in human cognition that removing it would make modern computing functionally collapse. Documents, emails, code, contracts, medical records, legal briefs, billion-dollar financial models. All of it moves through the world on the back of two keystrokes that one man designed in a lab in Palo Alto in 1973. His name was Larry Tesla. You have never heard of him. The companies that built trillion-dollar empires on his work made sure of that. Larry Tesla grew up in the Bronx in the 1940s, the son of working-class Jewish parents, with the kind of mind that couldn't stop asking why things were unnecessarily difficult. He studied mathematics at Stanford, graduated in 1965, and almost immediately became absorbed in a question that everyone else in computer science was ignoring. Why were computers so hostile to the people trying to use them? At the time, interacting with a computer meant learning its language, a rigid, unforgiving syntax that punished the smallest mistake with a cryptic error message. Tesla thought this was backwards. The machine should adapt to the human, not the other way around. This wasn't a casual professional interest. It was closer to a moral position. Tesla was politically active, involved in the counterculture movements of the 1960s, and he saw bad interface design as a form of exclusion, a way of keeping computers in the hands of specialists and out of the hands of ordinary people. He believed, with genuine conviction, that computing should be democratic, accessible, human. That belief would drive every design decision he made for the rest of his career. In 1973, he joined Xerox PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center, which was, by any honest assessment, the most remarkable concentration of computing talent in human history. Gathered under one roof were the people who would invent or refine the graphical user interface, the laser printer, Ethernet, object-oriented programming, and the mouse as a practical input device. Xerox had given them an almost unlimited budget and the freedom to invent the future. The understanding, explicit or implied, was that Xerox would then commercialize what they built. That second part would turn out to be the catastrophic failure, but in 1973, the failure was still years away. In 1973, Tesla was simply trying to solve a problem. The problem was text editing. In the early 1970s, editing a document on a computer was a process that required you to think like a compiler. You didn't see your text rendered normally on screen. You issued commands. You told the machine, delete from line 14, character 6, to line 14, character 19. Replace string the with string a globally. The document existed in the machine's memory, and you manipulated it through coded instructions. Tesla, who had been experimenting with early word processing tools and thinking about modeless interaction, interfaces that didn't require the user to switch between different operational states, found this infuriating, not just inconvenient, philosophically wrong. He began developing what he called a modeless text editor, and within that work, he crystallized the paradigm that would become copy and paste. The idea was this: text is not fixed to a location. It's more like a physical object you can pick up, move, and put down somewhere else. You select a piece of text by interacting with it directly, pointing at it, highlighting it. Then you cut it, lifting it out of its original position, or copy it, making a duplicate. The cut or copied material goes into a temporary holding space, a clipboard, and then you paste it, placing it exactly where you want it. Select, cut or copy, paste, 3 operations, one coherent, intuitive model of how text manipulation should feel. What made this revolutionary was not the technical mechanism, it was the conceptual framework. Tesla was modeling the computer interaction on something humans already understood: physical paper, scissors, and glue. Literally, editorial assistants in newsrooms in 1973 were cutting columns of typeset text with scissors and gluing them onto layout boards. Tesla took that physical metaphor and made it digital. He gave the computer interaction a grammar that human beings already spoke. You don't have to learn it. You already know it. That's the whole point. That's the genius. His editor, called Gypsy, ran on the Alto, the prototype personal computer being developed at PARC. And Gypsy was, for its time, astonishing. You used a mouse to click and drag to select text. You chose cut, copy, or paste from a menu. The text moved or duplicated or appeared cleanly, visually, immediately. A secretary, a writer, a student, someone who had never operated a computer before could be productive within minutes. Tesla had solved the problem he set out to solve. He had made computing human. Xerox did almost nothing with it. This is the part of the story that moves from admiration to something closer to grief. Xerox PLC's parent company, Xerox Corporation, was a copier business, a phenomenally profitable copier business, and therein lay the problem. Their executives looked at the graphical interface, the mouse, the modeless text editor, and they saw a threat to their existing business model rather than the foundation of an entirely new industry. There were internal attempts to commercialize PLC's technology. The Xerox Star, released in 1981, incorporated many PARC innovations including cut, copy, and paste, but it cost $16,000 per workstation. It was marketed exclusively to corporations. It was slow, limited, and strangled by a company that fundamentally didn't understand what it had. The Star sold roughly 30,000 units total. That's it, 30,000. The technology that would eventually run on billions of devices moved through Xerox's hands like water through a sieve. In December of 1979, something happened in a parking lot in Palo Alto that would change everything except for Tesla. Steve Jobs visited Xerox PLC. This is well-documented history, written about in dozens of books, including Walter Isaacson's biography of Jobs. Jobs had negotiated access to PLC's technology in exchange for allowing Xerox to purchase pre-IPO Apple stock. When Jobs and his team walked through PLC and saw the graphical interface and the mouse demonstrated, Jobs famously became almost agitated with excitement. He kept interrupting the demo. He understood instantly what Xerox's own executives had failed to understand for 6 years, that this was the future, not a future, the future. Larry Tesler was one of the PLC researchers who gave the demonstration that day. He showed Jobs the modeless editor, the text selection, the clipboard operations. Jobs watched, Jobs absorbed, and Jobs, within 2 years, began building the Lisa and then the Macintosh computers that would bring the graphical interface, the mouse, and cut copy-paste to the consumer market. Here is where the irony metastasizes into something almost surgical in its precision. The man who invented the tool of copying was copied from, systematically, completely, without compensation. Jobs later said, famously, that Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry. He was right. But Jobs also borrowed liberally, aggressively, and without payment from Tesla's work specifically. The Macintosh's text editing, the clipboard, the paste function, the conceptual DNA is Tesla's. Apple never paid Xerox for these ideas, and Xerox briefly sued Apple in 1989. But the suit was largely unsuccessful, and it revolved around interface elements broadly, not around Tesla's specific contribution, and not around compensating Tesla in any way whatsoever. He was not a party to the litigation. He was not consulted. He was not named. In a twist that has the structure of a fable, Tesla left Xerox PLC in 1980 and went to work for Apple. He spent 17 years there, working on the Newton, on various software projects, contributing his expertise in human interface design to the very company that had adopted and profited from his original paradigm. He was a valued employee. He was not made rich by the paradigm he invented. He received no royalties, no licensing fees, no retroactive compensation for the fact that every Apple product sold was, in part, built on his intellectual foundation. He left Apple in 1997. He went to Amazon. He went to Yahoo. He worked at a startup. He taught. He consulted. He lived comfortably by most measures. He was a successful engineer who had a long career in Silicon Valley. But successful career and credited inventor are not the same thing, and Tesla knew the difference. He maintained a website called nomodes.com, a reference to his modeless editor work, the root of everything, for years. He gave interviews. He spoke at conferences. He talked about PLC, about Gypsy, about the origins of copy and paste. He wasn't bitter, exactly. He was precise. He wanted the record to be accurate. The record was rarely accurate. The mainstream account of how copy and paste came to be usually starts with the Macintosh. Sometimes it starts with Apple. It almost never starts with Larry Tesla and Gypsy in 1973. The origin story was absorbed into the mythology of Jobs and of Apple's innovation, and the specific human being who did the specific intellectual work was rendered invisible by the sheer brightness of the corporate brand that consumed his idea. Meanwhile, the gesture itself expanded beyond any single platform. Microsoft incorporated cut, copy, and paste into Windows. Google built it into every product they make, every smartphone, every tablet, every web browser, every code editor, legal document system, content management platform, and email client on Earth runs on Tesla's framework. The economic value of that contribution, the productivity hours saved, the transactions enabled, the entire edifice of digital document management is genuinely incalculable. We don't have a unit of measurement large enough. And across all of it, across the entire span of the digital age, Larry Tesla received no royalties, not 1 cent. He died on February 16, 2020 at his home in Portola Valley, California. He was 74 years old. The cause was not reported publicly. He was survived by family and by a body of work that most people interact with daily without knowing his name. The tributes were warm, they were genuine. Tim Cook tweeted that every time you cut, copy, or paste, you're using something Larry Tesla invented. The tech press ran respectful obituaries, and then, within a few news cycles, the conversation moved on, because the system that erased him during his lifetime was not about to correct itself in his death. There's a version of this story that concludes with a condemnation of Steve Jobs, or of Xerox's management, or of the patent system, or of Silicon Valley's mythology of the lone genius founder that systematically erases the actual engineers and researchers who do the foundational work. All of those condemnations contain real truth. Xerox's failure was institutional cowardice masquerading as business caution. Jobs's appropriation of PARC's innovations, however legal, was an act of extraction that enriched Apple, while the original creators received nothing beyond a salary they would have received anyway. The patent system, which might theoretically have protected Tesla, was not structured in the 1970s to reward individual researchers at corporate research labs. Their employers owned their inventions, and if the employer didn't patent or commercialize, the work simply escaped into the world unprotected. But the deepest problem is something more structural than any one person's decision or any one company's failure. The deepest problem is that we've built a narrative economy around innovation that rewards visibility over contribution. The person who ships the product becomes the inventor. The person who builds the platform becomes the creator. The person who was in the lab in 1973 working out the metaphysical grammar of how humans and computers should communicate, that person becomes a footnote if they're mentioned at all. Tesla himself understood this. He didn't spend his final years in public bitterness, but he kept correcting the record, quietly and persistently, every time he had the chance. He knew that the history of computing was being written in a way that left out most of the people who actually made it. He knew that the attribution problem wasn't about ego, it was about what we teach the next generation of engineers and designers about how value is created and who gets to claim it. Every time you press Ctrl+C, you are performing an act that was designed by a specific human being in a specific room in a specific year, because he believed that computers should be easier for ordinary people to use. That belief had a name, Larry Tesla. The computers got easier. The ordinary people came. The trillion-dollar companies were built. And the man who drew the first sketch of the map never received a dime from any of the expeditions that followed it. That's not a metaphor, that's the transaction, and it's worth sitting with the next time your fingers find those keys without thinking.